So we've received one question from Dudley Marr of Highgate in respect to item 10.1, which is the arts grants. At the 30th of March special meeting of council, the full council approved spending up to $500,000 of the percent for art money on projects to provide relief for local artists. At the same meeting, council approved spending up to $1 million from the Leederville Gardens Trust on relief funding, established the COVID committee and delegated some powers to them. One of the powers was to accept tenders over $250,000. I assume that this is included accepting tenders of less than $250,000, but this was not explicitly stated. I have serious concerns about the relief funding and the possibility that it will be used for activities that are not as a consequence of COVID-19 in accordance with the council's decision. I'm particularly concerned about the expenditure on arts relief and that it may go to people who did not genuinely depend on income from their art. In addition, I am concerned that there will be a flood of money so that the city will be funding projects that may not have been normally considered worthy. The Commonwealth Government has made it clear that artists who have an ABN, for example, are registered as artists and who can demonstrate a loss of income are eligible for JobKeeper payments. My concern is that the city will be funding people who previously did not have an ABN prior to this project and are just people who dabble in the arts rather than practitioners who rely on it for income. The delegation was approved on 30th of March, explicitly referred to tenders and made reference to section 3.57 of the Local Government Act 1995 and Regulation 18 of the Local Government Functions and General Regulations 1996. There was no other explicit financial delegation other than for tenders. The questions are, given that the full council meeting is meeting an hour after the COVID committee, why hasn't the art item taken to full council for consideration and approval, with all council members given the opportunity to comment and decide? Given that there was no explicit financial delegation to the COVID committee other than the one concerning tenders, have all approvals for the disbursement of the Leederville Gardens Trust money being done by way of a tender? Is the money proposed to be disbursed from the percent for arts reserve being done by way of a tender? Given that the terms of reference to the committee and the council approval of 30th of March did not explicitly delegate powers to act as trustees for the Leederville Gardens Trust, did the committee have the authority to act as the trustee for the fund when approving the use of funds from the trust? Has the city complied with all requirements for tenders as specified in the Local Government Act and associated regulations for both the disbursement of the Leederville Gardens Trust monies and the percent for art money? Why doesn't the city's tender register contain details of the funds that have been disbursed from the trust so far? That concludes the questions we've received. Thank you, Mayor Cole.
Thank you very much, Manager of Governance. CEO, did you wish to respond to any of those questions tonight, or the answers be in the agenda papers next week?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we can provide full responses to those questions in the agenda papers for next week.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. So in relation to 3B, response to previous public questions taken on notice, we have some questions that were asked also by Mr. Meyer, and the responses are provided in the agenda papers. Item 4, declarations of interest. CEO, have you received any declarations?
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, none received tonight.
And just checking with my council colleagues, do you have any declarations to bring forward? No. Okay. Item 5, applications for leave of absence. Any applications to come forward? No. And confirmation of minutes. This is for item 6, COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting of the 9th of June 2020. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. All those in favour? Declare the minutes carried. So that takes us to business arising and item 7.1, our regular COVID-19 weekly update. I'll just call for a mover and seconder, and then we can have comments or questions. Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Thanks. I don't have any major questions this week. I assume we'll get an update of anything that's changed since the previous week. I did just wonder about the closure of Leederville Village Square and a notice that businesses are using Mary Street Piazza. And I'm just wondering if, with the easing of restrictions, whether we are still investigating options in other town centres to make spaces available, or whether that's still necessary, and if there's other support that we might need to adjust or provide given the changes of those restrictions.
I'm just noting that the Director of Strategy and Development is absent and unwell, which I should have noted at the beginning of the meeting. But
That's okay. I'm happy to
Manager
have that
of
reported next
Built
week.
Form and Wellbeing, is that something that you feel that you could respond to?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Cole, what we've found with phase 3, with the density rule going from 1 per 4 down to 1 per 2 and the limit, gathering limit going up to 100, it means that businesses are able to operate much more to their capacity within their actual buildings, which means that the stresses in terms of having to move into public land isn't such an issue for them at the moment. So we are still in contact with the businesses adjacent to these spaces and having those regular discussions. But in terms of the density rule, it's actually making it much easier for them to operate at the moment. But it is something that we're having continual discussions with them about.
Thank you. And just one more question in relation to contact tracing particularly for food and beverage businesses. I noticed that over the last few months, we've been providing a lot of support for these businesses to adjust to the restrictions. I'm just wondering if you've had any feedback from businesses about how they're managing that and whether there's been any privacy concerns raised by either the businesses or residents or patrons of those businesses.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, we haven't had any concerns being raised to the city about privacy concerns. The COVID safety plan guidelines are fairly detailed around how long that record should be kept for. And in fact, it hasn't necessarily attracted people from attending.
Nothing further? Okay. Councillor Kondrashevsky? Okay. I might come back to you, Manager. I was just wanting to ask about, and I know this is not a good fit for phase 3 necessarily, but has there been any thoughts about swim school and when that may open up? And this, feel free also, Director of Community and Business, if this is more your area. I also just wondered, now that we have extended the opening hours at Beatty Park, we're no longer taking bookings, which is absolutely fantastic now, 7 days a week. Are we moving back to restating memberships? How's it looking in terms of staffing? Just sort of an update on whether we're starting to get, what sort of percentage of normal operation do you think we could probably estimate Beatty Park to be at? And just in the community centre, I was just interested to know if some of our hirers have returned to the Loftus Community Centre.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, if I can take the last part of your question first. So the community centre activities are certainly picked up. The majority of our seniors programs have now returned. We have some play groups. I think drama class for children has started, and people are now starting to inquire about hiring the venue. So we're definitely seeing that activity is starting to pick up there. With regards to Beatty Park, some of your specific questions I would need to take on notice and perhaps come back to you next week. But yeah, as you said, we are, as we are confident with our processes, we are trying to extend our opening hours as much as we can to meet the demand. We're not requiring bookings in the swimming pools because we're finding that they're not actually at capacity. So now we're able to open that up to other members of the public. And similarly with fitness classes, there's a lot of demand there, but we need to just monitor that at the moment. We're looking at swim school starting as of next week, and that will just be in the mornings only. So just progressively, we're slowly switching on all of these various activities. But I would note that, normally this is a venue that has many thousands of people that come through it in a day, and we're still in the hundreds. So we're a long way off capacity, and at the moment we are really just looking at trying to, trying to provide an option to the community. Yeah, we had about 800 people come through today, and we're just really trying to provide a break-even type arrangement. We are starting to bring our casuals back, so that's something we're really excited about. We brought in about 40 casuals to start working again last week. And you might recall that it was sort of about 160 people were impacted by Betty Park's closure. So yeah, we're really, as I said, excited that we're starting to get back on track with that.
Thank you very much, Director. Some good news there. That's good to hear.
Also, through you, Mayor Cole, further to what the Director said, BD Park has applied for an exemption. At the moment, they're meant to be having 300 people or less in the venue, so they've applied for an exemption to increase that number to 485, and we'll see how we go with that application.
That's great. Thank you very much, Manager. Also, just a comment in relation to the report talks about the state government's housing stimulus package, and we have received a letter from the Premier asking that we move through our development application process as quickly as possible to help this. But of course, it also is impacting at the Tamala Park Regional Council and the Catalina Estate. So there's already been signs there of much better sales than we have seen in many months. And I'm due to attend a meeting tomorrow night, so I hope to get a bit more information, but there had already been some strong movement happening as a result of that stimulus package. So that's helpful for us at this particular juncture. So good to see. All right, that was all from me on this report. Oh, other than, sorry, I did just want to check in with Leederville Village Square. We had the square closed this weekend. Is there a sort of clear direction on what's continuing with the square on weekends from this point into the sort of short-term future? Does anyone have a view as to what would be happening, for example, over the next month with the closure of Leederville Village Square, or does that need to be provided to through someone from policy and strategy and development, rather?
Yeah, Mayor Cole, based on our conversation earlier today, I did make a few inquiries about that. And so, as you said, we will be opening, we will be closing the Village Square this weekend, as we've done the last few weekends. The policy and place team are currently looking at how long that might need to continue, and it'll depend on the amount of, I suppose, economic activity it's generating. So there is a little bit of an impost from on behalf of the city with regards to that process. It's not insurmountable, but it is just something for us to monitor as an ongoing thing. So I think as of next week, we'll definitely have a much clearer forward plan, and we will have had the opportunity to talk to the local businesses and see what the best approach is going forward.
Thank you very much, Director. I appreciate that information. Okay, so unless there are any further questions, I'll put the item. All those in favour, declare the motion carried. We do have a confidential item, but first of all, we do need to deal with announcements by the presiding member. I won't bore you because I do have to make announcements at the council meeting, so I'll skip that. General business, we do have an item of general business, and it is about transitioning the meetings to fortnightly meetings commencing the 30th of June. So it's just an item for discussion. We don't need to move or second, but there has been an email that's talked about whether we continue meeting weekly till the 30th of June and then look at convening fortnightly meetings and not on a council meeting night, because then we can, use that if we need to. I just would welcome your feedback on that. It doesn't have to be decided this evening. I think that the 1 p.m. time frame that we're looking at as well would possibly work better from a parental responsibility perspective, given that we all do have children that need looking after, and 5 is a very awkward time. It's sort of worked okay on Zoom, but coming back to in-person meetings, I think that does present some issues. And I think the idea is that if it's 1 p.m, it's still accessible to people. If they are working, they can tune in. It will continue to be broadcast. And I assume we'll continue to be able to take questions in writing in advance as well. So I think it doesn't have to be decided tonight, but perhaps one of the considerations is getting through arts relief grant funding and what sort of period of time that might take. So are there any comments that you wanted to make about this?
My only comment was really advice from administration about when we expect to see the next phase, as much as we're able to tell at this point. And if you're comfortable that fortnightly will give us enough time to respond to changes. Obviously the pace has slowed considerably, but if administration believes that that gives us enough time to deal with things, then I don't have a problem.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, when the roadmap was announced, we were expecting there would be a 4-week gap between the phases. So in approximately 2 weeks' time, we may have a phase 4. But previously I was expecting that to be early in July. I don't think that the announcement around phase 4 will be as impactful as the ones regarding phase 2 and phase 3. So I feel very comfortable with fortnightly meetings. I expect that phase 4, there'll be more implications mainly around our events industry, but I believe that we can handle that with fortnightly meetings.
And just to add to that, if we do need to have additional meetings, we can call additional meetings, or we can revert back to weekly if we find ourselves in a second stage of the pandemic. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen, but we can definitely be flexible and recall the meetings. I think we'll just go with the pace, and then if it picks up again, we can be responsive again. So yep, okay, well, sounds like we're on to something there. I think there was just a flagging around potentially with school holidays and things. We might just need to coordinate dates before we lock them in, and just have a conversation about arts relief funding and how that how we get through that, because there is, I think, a need to get funding dispersed as well. So we can talk about that in more detail. Okay, so we're now...
Through you, Mayor Cole, can I just comment, we do need to provide public notice of the dates after 30th of June. So should we aim to present a report back to the committee on the proposed dates next week, and then that will give us sufficient time to organise public notice?
I think that would be fine, thank you. Yep. All right, now we do have a confidential item this evening, and it is the Arts Relief Grants funding recommendation. So I will need a mover and seconder to move behind closed doors. Moved Councillor Gondaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Declare the motion carried. Yes, so for those who have tuned in, we will just have a brief confidential session to consider these items behind closed doors. So we will briefly turn off the broadcast, but we will return dealt with item 10.1 Arts Relief Grants Funding Recommendations, and the adopted motion is that the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee endorse artists 1, 5 and 6 to be recipients of arts relief funding as recommended in the report. Okay, so the final items for consideration this evening are to consider the next meeting date. So we do have 2 further weekly meetings at this point, the 23rd of June 2020 and the 30th of June 2020. There being no further items this evening, I will close the meeting at 5:56 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody.